Ladies and gentlemen, it is High Spots at Cheap Pops. I am Silicon Steve Valli, and that is Vladi, and we're talking about the world of professional wrestling. And we want to thank all of you beautiful, sexy, amazing new subscribers. You guys are amazing for signing up. We're on our way to the tippy top. And we start. CM Punk is all the rage and still a big part of conversation. Lottie Dottie, you have some words that you wanted to talk about by WWE. I think he's in the Hall of Fame. Perhaps not. Mark Henry. Isn't Mark Henry in the Hall of Fame?
I'm pretty sure he's in the Hall of Fame, yeah.
Hall of Famer Mark Henry. You said it was interesting. I haven't heard these quotes yet. Let's lay them on you, and I'll give you my reaction, and we'll see where it goes.
And here, Mark Henry's considered to be a pretty respected guy in the industry. He has a pretty regular gig on Busted Open Radio with Dave LaGreca. Of course, hey, they're going to ask him about it, and this was his comment. He set the table as to what happened, of course, and everything else. And then Mark Henry got onto this point, and this is what he said. He said, quote unquote, "Now you can freely go and there will be no complaining. There should be no more complaining. The problem is gone. The so-called problem is everything should be shits and giggles and unicorn pee and rainbow blankets. That's what it should be now. I'm curious to see how it's going to be. The problem is solved." I'd like to hear your perspective, but I'll sort of give you mine after you go, unless you want me to go first.
I'm assuming he's being sarcastic. I didn't hear how he said it, because that quote, to be honest with you, Vladi,
yeah,
that quote's one that I have to hear how you say.
Okay,
it sounds like he's being sarcastic, and he sounds like in a way he's being sarcastic that he doesn't believe CM Punk was the big problem. I don't know if I just agree with that, but either way, that's what it sounds like he's saying. But it could also be just a challenge. Okay, now the cancer's gone that you guys are blaming that everything's going to be great in the company. Now that CM Punk is gone, let's see how you guys react. Maybe he's challenging because he still is employed by AEW. So, and it could be a combination of the two. That's how I take that quote.
That's the way I sort of took it. And it's almost like a man up moment. Like, hey, you wanted him gone. He's gone. Let's see how it is here now. And what's the vibe in the locker room saying 6 months? It's a little bit of a milestone. Is everybody happy? Is this, or just half of the people happy? But yeah, that's the way I sort of took it. Very similarly to you. And I thought, you know what? Like, he says the problem is gone. Then he kind of hedges his bets in the so-called problem. So I think he's willing to admit, the part of the problem was CM Punk's reactions for sure. But they no longer have to deal with it. So, all right, guys, where are we going to take this company now? And being a current employee, especially, it really rang true to me. I was like, wow, man, I'm like, this guy, maybe he should be the guy that sits next to Tony and just basically is like, helps decide things in terms of like talent issues.
Mark Henry?
Would you want to get into it with him? I mean, it's pretty physical.
Oh, you want him as a heater?
Yeah, like, you know what? Like, with CM Punk gone after Tony Khan, if Mark Henry's standing there,
no,
Mark Henry probably would just talk sense into him quick. And same thing with, say, if it was Jungle Jerkoff and any other random wrestler that maybe he had alienated.
What could he have done, Tony Khan? What could he have done to get Punk to go after him if he did? I don't want to speculate, though, but it certainly sounded like it.
If I were to speculate, I think it was everything amounted to that, from probably the Elite re-signing, very rich contracts, not having to immediately work with him on his terms, probably irritated him. Then all of a sudden, he's got control of a show. And what happens is he's dealing with some bullshit backstage on his show with the underlings of the Elite. And then, as we discussed on one of the podcasts, where he's traveling to Europe, It's like one of the elite's tannins is a travel agent. I don't know if it was that guy or another agent, but he did have some interesting likes on Twitter, which, you know how it is. I'm sure somebody showed it to him. You know, hey, the travel guy's liking shit about you on Twitter while we're here in England. It probably annoyed him. And then as he's waiting to go on in front of 81,000 people, he's got Jungle Jerk-Off talking into the camera about him. And then as he's in Gorilla, say CM Punk, who's to his left or right, wherever it might be, is Tony Khan, who's the owner of this all, and is not putting an end to it. Or like putting himself into the mix and at least trying to like stop it in some ways. I mean, hell, there was even previous to London, there was a rumors of like a meeting that was supposed to happen between Punk and the Elite. Didn't happen. I'm sure that irritated him as well. So again, I'm not trying to justify it, but like I don't think it was any one thing. Like I don't think Tony was like, "Hey, good match," and then Punk's like, "I'm gonna rip your head off," like that.
No,
I just think he was. All of his heat and anger was directed towards him. I'm interested if it ever comes out and they show on camera, like, any of the film that they have that eventually it's released. I mean, I can only imagine. It seems pretty bad. Seems like his fuse was lit. But yeah, so I don't know if there's any one thing. But before we forget, there's one other part of the quote that Mark Henry said on this, which like, they weren't necessarily highlighting this one elsewhere, right? Which drew me to this article and these quotes, right? The next quote, Henry stated that he didn't know what happened backstage at All In. Details of it quickly got out. And then it was said that the leaks needed to be controlled. And you know what? You were watching All In. And as soon as, the Jungle Jack Perry thing happened, I was like, oh, there you go. I'm getting like a notification or I'm seeing it on Facebook. I'm like, oh man, this is happening right before they go on. This is crazy. So here's this quote about the leaks and everything, right? So, quote unquote, there have always been stooges and moles, said Henry. You want to nip that in the bud and put punishments out there for it. If you find out this person did this or leaked that, how can you trust that? You have to have hard punishments for that. I don't think there is. I think people feel like you're going to get a slap on the wrist, if anything. So they're going to keep exposing what happened behind the scenes. It sucks. And that was his take on it. I was like, you know what? There's an adult in the room. Like, you shouldn't be worried at work in the gorilla position about people that are in that room that are like sidebarring with different dirt sheets during an event.
It's unprofessional. It's unprofessional. It's unprofessional.
Boom. Holy shit. So there you go, man.
Amateur.
So it's amateur. It is.
Amateurs.
That aspect of it is, man. And Tony knows it.
And that's been the problem. That's been a problem. Most of this is all because Tony didn't squash this shit. Tony is weak in a lot of ways as a leader. And look, by the way, much gratitude to Tony Khan because he changed the professional wrestling world more so, at least his company did, and his money did, more so than any one person has changed this business other than maybe Vince McMahon. And that's at least the last 30 years. And that includes Eric Bischoff. Sorry.
What about Jeff Jarrett?
Oh, not him, obviously. He's...
Oh, shit.
I mean, Jesus Christ. You ever... Jeff, you know Jeff Jarrett? Well, put it this way. You ever heard of Vince McMahon? Dave... Crockett Productions? Morons. Anyway. No, I don't, I forget where I was going with that, but stupid sidebar shit. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I probably threw you off with the Jeff Jarrett thing.
Oh yeah,
you're talking about Tony Khan. He doesn't have it under control.
Yeah, and a lot of this also one of the big things that I don't think it's talked about enough. John Moxley's your world champion, doesn't have a fucking contract, so John Moxley didn't have to job the way Punk wanted him to. If John Moxley's under contract, no, dude, you're jobbing to Punk at the pay-per-view, period. Call it a day. But because Moxley didn't have a contract, no, we're doing the Rocky 3 thing. Sorry. I'm squashing you, and then you're going to beat me at the pay-per-view in your hometown, and people will love it. It'll be great.
Yeah.
So Punk's like, who the fuck is this guy to not want a job to me? Like, I mean, if you're CM Punk, you know you like yourself. But he's arguably the biggest star in the company, which includes Jon Moxley. And Moxley's saying, fuck you. But Punk also has to understand he didn't have a contract, didn't have to, and Moxley probably didn't like him. I think there's a lot of truth to what Eddie Kingston said in the first couple of weeks Punk showed up in the company. A lot of people, I'm not saying it's everybody. We know Roy, we know Will Hobbs, and we know Will Hobbs and Ricky Starks loves him, and FTR loves him, and there's a couple other people that love him. But a lot of people don't. They thought he was a dick. So that's kind of, and that was in any locker room he's been in, from what I gather. So at the end of the day, I think Mark Henry was brilliant with what he said. Now, I don't know, again, not hearing it, so I don't know if he was being fully sarcastic and basically saying CM Punk wasn't it, and he was kind of defending Punk. I don't know. But it's hard to defend Punk and what he's done, too. You can bring up the Elite like you do, and you can bring up Jungle Boy, and you can bring up Dolph Ziggler's brother and whoever, and the traveling. You can bring up all that, but nothing really excuses the way Punk acted. But we've been down that road we talked about, so I don't get too much into it. But I think Mark Henry's quotes are spot on. And, you wanted this guy gone. He was a big draw for your company. He brought excitement to your product. Whether you want to admit it or not, AEW is a lot better with CM Punk in it on television, folks. Every Saturday night was a fun watch. 2 weeks in a row, it's been Rampage 2. So call it what it is. And Mark Henry is saying, okay, the problem is gone. The guy who was drawing money is gone. Now, not only do you have to get along and have the unicorn, look, the unicorn and rainbow and all that bullshit that he said, he's clearly being sarcastic. That's another point. But not only do you all have to get along, you're going to have compelling television, and you're going to have to start drawing money, and you're going to have to start at least coming close to the ratings you had the first couple of weeks. And what they put on, having Gravity and whatever the fuck else was going on Rampage. Oh, I'm sorry. Freudian slip. Collision, whatever the hell else they had going on Collision, that wasn't it this past weekend or last weekend. Not saying they were horrible shows, but they're not cool. Let me watch Collision. It's maybe I'll watch Collision if I have time. Just like Rampage.
Here it's like almost 3 days later, and I finally watched. There was like no sense of urgency for me to check it out.
Jade Cargill came back, and then Bryan Danielson, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. Bryan Danielson announced he'll only have a year left. Nothing was wow, and again, Mark Henry is challenging them in those two ways, not just to get along. He's challenging them to draw the money and have compelling television and get people to watch. Because when Punk wasn't there, it wasn't quite as compelling. We'll see where it goes from there. But I like what Mark Henry said overall, but it kind of sounds like he was throwing a lot more shade at AEW than he was Punk. Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's time. It's, it's like, but to me, it's like there's an adult in the room, and he's sort of putting it on the table. Today, it's like almost a rebirth at this moment. I mean, what's unfortunate is like they had the largest event, and what everybody's talking about is shit that's going on behind the scenes in the locker room and on social media instead.
Yeah, which is an indictment of Punk more so than anyone, but it's also an indictment of Tony Khan kind of letting the, as they say, letting the inmates run the asylum there. And certain guys have a lot more infinite influence on Tony than others. Like Chris Jericho has probably a ton of influence on Tony Khan. And Chris Jericho knows it. Jericho's been in this business a long time. He probably looks at Tony Khan like a mark. And that's why Jericho's always doing whatever he wants to do.
He knows how to manipulate it.
Well, whatever the case may be. I mean, Jericho's not doing anything that any other top guy did prior to him. Let's be real. He's basically doing Hogan right now.
Right. But do you often go back in time and after history has passed us and say, hey, those Hogan booking days, man, whew, that was it. So it's not necessarily a compliment when we say, yeah, that's what he's doing. I mean, he's doing what Kevin Nash did and what Hulk Hogan did. And, I mean, we don't really go back and say, man, we really need a lot more of that.
Finger poke of doom.
Exactly.
That was a Kevin Nash booking. Goldberg and Nash had heat.
They did actually. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw it right on our
because of shorts.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know they had heat, so I thought that was interesting. But yeah, so I don't know. Well, good for Mark Henry, and let's see where the Elite go. But Collision's not been must see the last 2 weeks. Time to get some things moving with Bullet Club Gold, particularly Jay White. Time to get some things moving with Bryan Danielson now that you only have a year left, which is almost depressing. What's that, 5 pay-per-views? All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching High Spots and Cheap Pops. For Vladi and Valli, this is Silicon Steve Valli. Hit the subscribe button. Enjoy your professional wrestling, and here endeth the lesson.